You're listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast, brought to you by DraftKings, America's #1 sportsbook app, joined by John Schuster. I am Mike Luke. It looks like William Brad Alice is tapping in here as well. Hello there, William.
Hello there, fellas.
All right, let's go. Let's get to it. Arizona wins 95-78. Couple things. First of all, I want to tip my cap to Southern here, because a lot of times when overmatched teams come in here, they don't play. They try to switch up their style. They try to do something else just to keep the score respectable. Southern played hard. Southern played fast the entire game. I give them a lot of credit for that.
Well, in addition to that, and I think you're right in that regard. It's one of those games that for both teams there are elements you can take from it and build. But I was also pleased to see that Southern, at least in the first half, decided to do its best impression of Illinois in the 2001 NCAA tournament. And I think final tally was somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 fouls. Always nice to see a college basketball game on a Friday night go about 2 hours and 27 minutes long because of the number of fouls and the lack of rhythm as a result. But I think to some degree, what Southern illustrated here is a template that Arizona is going to have to deal with for a good portion of the season. Teams are going to try to see how well Arizona handles pressure, and more notably, they're going to see how well Arizona can handle physicality. And I think the Cats are going to get bumped around a lot this year. And they're going to have to be up to the challenge to be able to do that. We're going to see some conflicting styles.
Do you worry about, let me stop you real quick. Sorry to interrupt you. Let me just stop you real quick. Do you worry about you said they're going to get bumped around. Do you worry about the physicality issue? Are you saying that this is more of a finesse team? Is that what you mean right there?
I think there's a lot of that. And there are times where the finesse style works just fine. Arizona's going to win most of the games they play this year. Their style is very difficult from an offensive standpoint. They've now put together 2 games where they've scored 117 and 95. Arizona's going to put up a lot of points, and a lot of points is going to cause other teams problems. But I think teams are going to try to get kind of nasty with Arizona and try to do things to disrupt what it is the Cats want to do. And it's up to Arizona to be able to weather those challenges. And what a lot of that means isn't so much how well can Arizona rebound per se, because the Cats have a height advantage. I think the issue with this is how well in the backcourt Arizona is going to be able to hold the ball and limit turnovers when these become half-court games. And I'm not necessarily convinced at this stage how well Arizona is going to do that, but I'm very interested to see over the course of the next 3 weeks or so when competition ramps up here, exactly how it is that Arizona answers what I think is going to be a regular approach by the opposition.
William?
Yeah, I think she hit the nail.
Ow, nails hurt.
I was going to say, William, you froze up right there.
No, Brad, no. We want to hear more from Brad.
The ball.
Oh, there we go. Brad's almost back.
Talking about losing the ball, have it knocked away when you're down low. So I think, she's absolutely right. When you have 19 turnovers and what they have the other night, over 20, I think, those are big numbers against, teams that aren't as athletic as them. And tonight, Southern, a lot of that was created by 2 things, hustle and physicality. So those are things that, Arizona is going to have to do their best to overcome.
All right, let's talk. I wanted to ask a little bit talk a little bit about Pelle Larsson here, because I want to break down some of these players here. And is Pelle Larsson the best player on this team? I didn't think going into this year that I thought it would probably be Tubelis, but if I just look at it, and again, it's very early on in the season. These are two teams that aren't very good that Arizona played, but there is when you look at it, Pelle Larsson to me is the easiest guy to pencil in now as being 16 points, like you said, Shu, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. He has that feel about him, like what you're going to be able to count on with him.
Yeah, and I think you can make the argument from game in and game out. If he isn't the best, he's going to be perhaps Arizona's most consistent player. And, you like to have those guys on the roster. At some point in the conversation, we have to get past the notion that Larsson maybe isn't that athletic. Because, again,
he's athletic.
He gets wherever he wants on a fairly regular basis and can do a lot of little things, and it's nice to have those guys on the roster. While he's a different style of player, I think, and while I think he's going to score more as well throughout the course of the year, he may average about 15 once the season is done. Larsson is the closest thing it appears right now, and I think there are other guys on the roster that have an opportunity maybe to be this. But Larsson is the closest guy on the roster who is a direct replacement for Dalen Terry's ability to fill a stat sheet. And again, that's a nice thing to have on the roster. And beyond that, Arizona had some other good performances as well, but Larsson's consistency is a good thing to see.
I like Larsson, but I find it ironic that we're now moving him ahead of the guy who had 20 points in the first half last week,
right?
And was 6 of 9 from the field tonight. So I'm still taking Tubelis as the best player, but I like what Larsson's doing. And Larsson, other than his outside shooting tonight, and I think he was 0 for 4, but the shot looked good coming off the hand. I thought most of those were down when he shot them. But yeah, Tubelis has been really, really good. Again, no one his height. Inferior competition, but 20 points in a half or whatever that number was tonight. 6 of 9, 17 points. Pushing double figure rebounds. Tubelis is Tubelis. I still think it's Tubelis till Larsson steals it from him. What is the Ric Flair saying, Shu? To be the man, you got to beat the man.
Well, hopefully
he hasn't beaten Tubelis yet.
Well, hopefully that isn't Larsson's approach. That would be counterproductive. But nevertheless, you'd like to see both of those in that conversation. I think additionally, and I know, Mike, you're ultimately going to get to this. Kriisa had a triple-double tonight, the second of his career, which is excellent. And the guy who I think to some degree maybe we're forgetting, because he may play a bit of a trickle down that benefits everybody else, is that Ballo is really difficult for the opposition to deal with.
By the way, he is massive out there.
Massive.
I don't know. And he is just a big individual.
And Mike, there just aren't that many people in college basketball that have that size, and that's going to be a problem. The concern with Ballo, I think, and Brad will recognize this reference, and probably being the clairvoyant that he is, knows where I'm going with this, is the well-known Phoenix Suns player from about 30 years ago, Mark West, who we would often joke would get 2 fouls before he showed up in the arena. It seems that sometimes Ballo is in that category as well, where he hasn't done anything wrong. He's just big, and the referees just call fouls on him. So you hope he doesn't get into foul trouble. But what he brings on the floor is something that allows Tubelis to flourish and allows other guys like Larsson to flourish as well. And I think Ballo is very important. There are a lot of guys on this roster who are, but Ballo is a guy who is very important. While we're playing the shell game of is it Tubelis and is it Larsson, I think you can make a very strong case for Ballo as well.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Kerr Kriisa, because again, he did finish with a triple-double tonight. He's and I've said this all off season, and we've talked about this. I just need him to shoot 40% from 3, 40% from the field, and we're going to be good. I think you're good there. I do worry about, and you're seeing this a little bit, and I can't really blame him for this because it was mainly the other team or other players that were turning it over. I do worry about this team, though, that against pressure. I do worry about this team against physical pressure, because when you watch Kerr, when you watch some of the other ball handlers, there isn't a guy that, and again, I don't want to, we grew up spoiled, but there wasn't, or I grew up spoiled. You guys are a little bit older than me. Sorry. But,
a century or two.
Right. Luke could give the ball to Mike Bibby or Damon Stoudemire and just say, get the ball up the court, and you didn't have anything to worry about. This team doesn't really have that from a ball handling / physicality perspective. And that,
Mike,
I think is
Mike, is Ramey that guy?
He's more of a 2, but he's gonna have the ball in his hands. I mean, he really is. He's gonna have the ball in his hands. Again, I like what I saw from Kerr, but at the same time, though, I do worry against your Tennessees of the world that are going to be coming up, your Arkansas of the world. I think this is something that Arizona's got to figure out for sure.
To me, my big question is, and didn't see every turnover. I'll admit I was kind of in and out with some things going on. How many of the turnovers are because of the other team's physicality and athleticism, and how much is Arizona getting too cute, getting careless? I saw several where they just threw the ball away at the top of the key with no one really on them. Threw it into the passing lane, and Southern just picked it off. I'd really like to almost, I need some advanced analytics or something to tell me how many are forced, how many are unforced, and how many are just, for lack of a better word, ill-advised hot dog passes. Remember, we talk about Luke. Luke used to have to tell Luke Walton to calm down because Luke Walton wanted to make everything a behind the back bounce pass. When, the guys you mentioned, Bibby, as good as he was, didn't have a lot of flash.
Right.
He was fundamental. It was just get the ball in the guy's hands. His flash came more in his ability to score, and even that wasn't, crazy. Your best Arizona point guards have Steve Kerr was steady. He had that 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio by playing within himself, and that team moved the ball like crazy. Kriisa likes to hot dog every once in a while. Larsson can even be a little careless. So, yeah, I'd like to see it as it develops, how much of this is just Lloyd needs to reel him in a little, and how much is a physicality thing, and how much is just adjusting and maybe, not taking into account that, for a low major, Southern is pretty athletic.
Speaking of this team right here, I wanted to tell you 2 things. Sean Schuster has coined the term for Arizona's big man advantage, the 4 peaks. And again, did you hear about the Swedish pinball? We're going to get to the Swedish pinball here in a minute. But John Schuster has talked about the 4 Peaks. 4 Peaks Brewery is the official brew also of PHNX. All right, so here's the deal. There is an away game watch party tomorrow at Tap and Bottle downtown. That means that you can show up there and get 4 Peaks at Tap and Bottle. You also, if you're up in Phoenix, because we know there are Phoenicians on this show, we don't hold that against you, but you can also go to the 4 Peaks Brewery there. You can get all kinds of deals. You can get discounts. It's good stuff. Again, enjoy responsibly, 21 and up. If I almost said if you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. But
if you got a gambling problem, go to Tap and Bottle.
Right. But show up again. We'll be down there again. We'll have 4 Peaks down there on tap as well, or, not on tap, but it'll be down there. And one other thing, the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. All right. You might say, Mike, what does that mean? I hear you saying it. Here's what it means. New customers can bet $5 on any NBA money line and get $200 if your team wins. You can also boost your winnings up to 100% with DraftKings stepped up same game parlays. It's simple. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. Again, code word PHNX. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. If you wanted to make some money on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX, I would suggest taking the over with the way that the Tommy gun gets up and down the court right there. So, all right. Now, looking at this team then, there was a couple other things I wanted to get to. There's quite a few things. This team is deep. I think that's going to help this team because, again, I think there's about 7 or 8 guys on this team that can really play. I don't think that Borovichinen or Dylan Anderson are going to get major minutes against good teams, but I think you already know now that you've got about a 7 or an 8-man rotation. You've got Kriisa, you've got Ramey when he comes back, you've got Cedric Henderson, you got Azuolal Tubelis, you got Ballo, you got Ball, and you've got Vasar. And then, after that, and Larsson in there, obviously. That to me is basically your 8 right there. And it's going to be on them to be able to figure out what, because this second half was ugly against Southern. It was, and Southern outscored them. That shouldn't ever happen no matter how much you get up.
It's not that the first half was particularly pretty either, but at least Arizona did enough to be offensively impressive to get the 49 points. And Southern had a lot to do with that. I think Arizona was at the foul line something like 25 times or so. And, it was...
We bring out your best vices
yeah, it was
here.
a rough night. Hey, as far as vices are concerned, at least tonight's game was the over, although Arizona did not cover the spread. So take that for what it's worth. It was probably worth more or less, depending on whether you bet on the DraftKings app. But yeah, it's the depth issue is something I think Arizona's fine. And in some of these games, I think that's going to be important because Arizona has 20 fouls that it can use on the inside. And that gives them an opportunity to go to the bench, especially on the interior if things get tough in some of these more competitive games. The concern that I have is where they are from a wing standpoint. Ball at this stage, I think, is a guy who has all kinds of potential, but still seems to be closer to inconsistent than he is the guy who can be a surprise performer on a consistent basis. If he develops as this year progresses, I think that's good news for Arizona. And you got Bosworth and Henderson in there, and of course Larsson, who is a 2-3 or can play a variety of potential positions. But Arizona on the wing, I think, is going to be an area where the elite teams might have an advantage, and the Cats are going to have to try to figure something else out to be able to counter that as efficiently as possible. Because I think while they're deep and there are a lot of bodies who can play, that's an area that they don't necessarily excel well enough to get to the level that perhaps we'd like to see. Again, it's understandable. I'm sorry, guys. It's understandable. You're losing Mather and you're losing Terry, etc. Those are huge losses, and I think it's the area where Arizona's a little bit behind the curve, at least as far as things look right now.
William, what do you think of Boswell?
I think he's been good. Considering he was out as long as he was and nursing the knee injury. I've been impressed. He gives them a legit ninth guy. We might see them go 8.5 because remember, Ramey's not back yet. But he's a guy I think by the end of the year is going to be fighting for minutes and making Tommy Lloyd maybe have to make some interesting decisions. I think the good news for Boswell is actually what Schutt is talking about. In reality, Arizona is a 3-guard team. They don't have, what's Henderson? 6'6", 6'7"?
Mm-hmm. Right.
But he's not a long, he almost plays smaller in a weird way and bigger than he is. Bigger because he's physical, smaller because he's not that long Arizona wing that Matherin and Terry were last year.
Right.
So in reality, Larsson and even though Ball is kind of built that way, Ball's game is very much of a combo guard. So you kind of lack that real long athletic wing that they had a plethora of last year.
Well, and that's the thing.
But you make up with that because I think, again, unlike, when we talk about 3-guard offenses, I think we automatically kind of gravitate towards 94. But that was a team that was like 5'10", 6'2", 6'3". Right. This is, 6'3", could be 6'3", 6'5", 6'5". And, you resemble the quote-unquote 3-guard offense that maybe you had in 97, 98. Even Dickerson was a little bigger than that. Plus, you're not going with an undersized 4 like a Rayos. You're going with 2 7-footers. Or 3 7-footers in reality. So, yeah, I think it's interesting. I think Schutt makes some good points that they do lack that guy. And there are going to be some teams with those NBA wings that Arizona may have some matchup issues with. But conversely, there are going to be some teams that are going to have trouble matching up with Arizona when they go 3. And sometimes, they may even go with that really small lineup with Henderson at the 4.
And like you said, and Brad, you've always said this, that it's small forward you, and you look at the best teams in school history here. I mean, you look at any of the Final Four teams, obviously 88, you have Sean Elliott, 94, you had the guards, but like you said, you had Reggie there, which is kind of a jack of all trades there. 97, I mean, you got a Pluff, you got Dickerson, you got Simon, and then 01, you got RJ, you got Gilbert Arenas. And then even you look at the best teams that Miller had. You would have a Rondé Hollis Jefferson. You would have an Aaron Gordon. You would have a Solomon Hill, a Stanley Johnson.
Even Derek Williams, who played the 4, was far more a 3.
Exactly. You would have guys like that. So that is an interesting point, though, about I don't want to say lack of athleticism, but because Pelle Larsson, I think, is a pretty good athlete. I think that we established, but there isn't that 6'7" kind of, get out of my way. I'm going to do what I need to do on the defensive side type player on this squad.
And I think the big question comes down to, and last year we did not, Lloyd, and I like this about Lloyd. Lloyd more often than not dictates matchups. He's going to make you try to guard his guys. So if you want to throw that 6'7" guy out there, and he might be dangerous for Arizona's defense, but you got to keep up with Arizona going small or Arizona going very big with that front line. Hey, that Pac-12 net logo is really lighting up my face right now.
Right.
So I think that's to Lloyd's advantage, and Lute used to do this in a different way. He'd let one guy burn you. He's not going to let three guys burn you. So if that 6'7" guy's the matchup nightmare, well, Arizona tries to create a matchup nightmare at the 1, the 2, the 3, and then that post position where a lot of teams are going to have trouble with, like Shu said, Ballo. A lot of guys are going to have trouble with when you bring Ballo and Vesar or Tubelis out there, because you're suddenly 7 foot, or you're 7 foot 6'11". Those are going to be very tough matchups for people. But, Arizona's going to struggle when those 6'7" long athletic NBA, 3-and-D type wings come out on the court.
So what I think one of the things that Arizona's going to have to do, especially Mike and Brad, when the teams that you noted, that like Tennessee, like Arkansas, and there are going to be others on the roster as well, I think this is going to be, for teams that try this, a reasonably common thread. You're actually going to need big guys to be more effective, to be safety valves on that against the pressure defense. And that's something that Arizona can do. Now, once you get the basketball into their hand, just on the other side, near the top of half court, then they can at least hopefully get you into the offense to some degree, and they have to be tough enough not to lose the ball. But I think what you're going to see, there's going to be a concern in the backcourt against pressure if Arizona appears to be lazy in that regard, but they can go to safety valves at least with height, and hopefully that safety valve can at least get them into some sort of offensive flow.
All right, a couple things got to tell you about. More furniture, morfurniture.com, not MORE furniture, morfurniture.com. Remember it. They've redone the entire PHNX studios. I went up there to check it out for myself to be able to, because when you think Mike Luke, you think interior design. You can just tell by looking into my background where I'm at in the grand scheme.
You back the A in the background.
The back of the A is there. And you know what? More Furniture backs the A because at the same time, they endorse PHNX. Check it out, though. All kinds of good stuff right there. And the game time. Now, William Brett Alice, a little bit of a procrastinator, a very talented man, but a little bit of a procrastinator. Let's just say that William Brett Alice has a son that's pretty good, pretty big kid, pretty good at sports. And he says, you know what? I'd like to go to this game with Tyler. Maybe the Chiefs are coming into town. And William didn't realize until the last minute that they were going to be in town. And he says, I can't find tickets anywhere. William would go to the Game Time app, and then he would go on there and he would say, man, not only am I going to get tickets for Tyler and myself, we're going to get it at 60% off. That's what it is. Check the link in the description. Help us out. Get your stuff through the link in the description. How about that for both of those reads by bringing everybody into the equation?
Remarkable skill set right there. I'm glad you read the show notes for details.
One John Schuster invited me to a concert this week, and I had an obligation.
Queensryche, right?
Queensryche and Judas Priest, and had that concert ended early. I was going to jump on Game Time and see if I couldn't join Shu for the show, but it didn't work out.
Let's get to Kobe Thiel's point here. And again, this kind of goes to the physicality aspect here, guys. Against physical teams, Zoo and Ballo need to be demolition man down low. If your opponent's big is in foul trouble and own them, you can't pressure as much if you don't have your bigs backing up. I agree with him. This to me needs to be the one thing you go into each game knowing that our big men or Arizona's big men are bigger than the other and better than the other teams. Now, last year, kind of your trump card was Ben Mathurin, because generally Ben Mathurin was going to be the best player on the court. He was the one that gave you that real margin for error. This year, it's going to be a little bit different. You're going to have to, I think you're going to have to rely on those guys. To me, they both face a little bit of separate issues here. With Ballo, how is he going to do against quicker big men, guys that are your 6'8", 225 types? And with Tubelis, how's he going to do against physical guys like we saw against TCU and Houston that are looking to elbow him in the back? And I don't think we know that yet.
Probably not at this stage. I think, and and like KB noted, that a lot of those other teams are going to have to deal with those aspects because Ballo and Tubelis, you don't have front lines like that in a lot of college basketball. Some are able to counter that, obviously. I think Arizona's advantage isn't necessarily with those two. It's that they can go with two other guys on the bench if something doesn't quite go right with Tubelis and Ballo, or one of them gets into foul trouble. And that kind of depth and attrition, I think, is something that in key close games can hopefully work to Arizona's advantage, even if some of those other elements become problematic. The fact that Arizona's got 4 big guys that you can go to is something that's a luxury that a lot of other teams just don't have.
Right.
Don't forget also get Henderson. I mean, if you do have that 6'6", 6'7", athletic 4, that might be a Henderson 25, 30-minute game instead of a 20-minute game. Because he can match up with those guys. What I'll be interested about Henderson is, can he play? And we saw the kid for Southern. He's just a lesser version, who was what, 6'6", 270.
I was going to say that's a great point. Yes,
but can Henderson play the Houston guys who are 6'7", 240? Those tight ends who play for a lot of the teams in the Big 12. Can he play those guys? Because I think he can play, for the most part, I'm going to use, Jordan Bell types, that long,
great comparison. Great comparison.
7. He can guard that guy, or at least, be competent. But can he guard, that 6'7" guy who, again, looks more like an NFL tight end or D end than he does a power forward or small forward? And that's, but maybe at that point you just do stick Ballo on him, and then you got a 7'1" version of that guy guarding him. So I think Arizona's versatile enough. It would be nice to have, maybe a guy like Anderson, who does look like he might be a step quicker at some in the future than those other bigs, to guard those type of guys. He's not there yet. Or even a Borovichinen, who might be that guy in the future. So that could be one of those tough matchups, in which case you hope that the fact that 6'7" guy has to guard Ballo is just as big a mismatch, if not a bigger mismatch.
I think in the end here, they have bodies. And that's the thing that, if you're looking at this situation where, well, what if Tubelis goes up against A, B, C, or D, and Ballo goes up against A, B, C, and D? That's potentially going to be an issue from time to time. But there are some teams, but not that many teams, that can stroll out a 7-footer off the bench who's competent, not as good as the other two, but competent, and another 7-footer off the bench who's probably a year away, but can still buy you minutes here and there, or pick up fouls here and there. Maybe you need to put somebody at the foul line occasionally, and you have fouls to use in those sorts of situations. So I sort of expect that Arizona's size overall is going to be the key to their success this year, because they do have an opportunity to go a little bit deeper than a lot of other teams do. And they've got 2 guys who are on the front line who are pretty darn skilled.
That was going to be my next question. I was going to ask you, and Brad, I'll let you put in there. What is this team's, after watching a couple games, and I know we talked about this earlier, what does this team's upside feel like to you, and what is their floor, for lack of a better term?
I still think the upside, if everything falls into place, is they can be a top 7, top 8 type team who has a legit shot at the third weekend. Right. They've got a long way to go, but they don't lack much other than that 6'7", except for Ben Mathurin. But a lot of teams lack Ben Mathurin.
Right.
But the fact is, one thing I think is very interesting is with Anderson being your 4th guy, most of your elite teams, we're seeing a shift in college basketball, with a lot of the elite teams having bigs, because the bigs aren't getting drafted early.
Right. So
you have guys who are legit 5-star bigs who 20 years ago are the number one, Baycott, the big kid at Kentucky. Mm-hmm. Those guys are coming back to school because they're not getting drafted high. So Arizona, though, can now take on a Carolina and throw 4 guys at Baycott. And I know Carolina has other bigs. So I think that is very important for Arizona if they are going to make, a deep run, assuming all the other things click into place. To me, their floor, without injury is probably, a 6 or 7 seed.
Right.
A team that, just can't quite beat the good teams in those late games, who are going to fall to twice in Maui, who are going to lose, get to UCLA and maybe in Oregon. But I think more likely they're somewhere in between. But I think this is a better team, much like last year, than the national pundits are giving credit for, and I understand why. When you lose 3 NBA draft picks, and bring in a bunch of guys who no one has seen because they play international, there's that one guy from ESPN, but most of your
right, I know what you're talking about.
Your 24/7, your scout, those guys aren't seeing a whole lot of NBA Summit games. They're not going to Spain to watch Vesar play for his U17 team or whatever. So there is that mystery factor to Arizona. Again, how does Henderson fit and things like that. So, but yeah, I think if everything clicks, I think Arizona has the ability to, because again, they go, if Ramey's as good as we hope he is, and Boswell's your 9th guy, Dylan Anderson's out of the rotation. Again, we've talked about this. Dylan Anderson starts for Oregon State, right? I mean, he's their prize recruit.
Yeah.
He's starting for 6 or 7 teams. He's probably starting for ASU. And he's not going to see the floor much for Arizona. And in that regard, this reminds me a lot of a loot team that used to have 2 or 3 guys outside the rotation who 7 Pac-10 teams would kill to have.
We're getting a lot of smart people asking about Courtney Ramey. And again, I think Schuster made a point that I've stolen a few times on the podcast where you said, yeah, I know. I will steal. I stole the Swedish pinball. I stole the 4 Peaks. I came up with Tommy Gun, but Tommy Gun's kind of a natural thing, but those are all Schuster. But a bunch of people now asking Courtney Ramey, how does he impact this team? And outside of having that 6'6" Richard Jefferson type out there, I think having kind of that 6'2" athletic bulldog guard back there that can guard, 1 through 3 if need be. I think that's kind of what Arizona needs right now. I'm excited to see what Ramey can bring when he is inserted into the lineup.
If Ramey is the true combo guard that I think he is, that I saw in those, handful of games, and I didn't see him play a lot, that becomes important because it gives Arizona a real versatility where you can throw him at the 1 if Kerr is hot from behind the arc and kind of set Kerr Kriisa up to take a few extra shots, let him run the offense. If he can, again, be that physical. What is he, 23? I mean, he's in his, 5th or 6th year? I can't remember.
For sure.
And you're taking on a bunch of 18 to 19, there's a difference in grown man strength than there is in, most your average 18-year-old. And that's one of the reasons you've seen, these teams that have these older backcourts, I would say, Tiger at UCLA is that guy too. They're just grown men going up against sometimes kids, and you can push them around. We saw Houston do that to Arizona last year. Houston had a lot of 4th and 5th year guys. So I think that becomes a very versatile player where he can run the point. He can be the 2 guard. I think he can score when you need him to. He can defend when you need him to. If he's willing to accept that Swiss Army knife role, that jack of all trades, but as a starter, I think that pays huge dividends for Arizona.
Shoot.
It seems that Arizona has a lot of those all trades kinds of guys, versatile pieces that you can plug into a variety of different places here and there, guys who can fill stat sheets. But what they don't have so far, and there's the potential of it with Bosworth and Henderson, but what they don't really have consistently.
Boswell, shoot.
Thank you.
Not Brian Bosworth.
Okay, well, that's too bad because, that's kind of the problem because it's like a Bosworth type character right now. One of Arizona's fears is that you get run over by Bo Jacksons. So
I knew you were going to go there. That's awesome. Yes.
You don't want that from a college basketball standpoint when one of your announcers mistakes your name. But if Ramey can be that kind of physicality, that kind of physical guy, that sort of nasty, tough entity,
kind of that bulldog,
then I think that's very helpful, and it's something that Arizona maybe misses so far. And if he can provide a little bit of consistency, yes, Mike, this is going to be good. I just know it. I can tell.
Oh no. There's no tongue in cheek here. But if he could be a poor man's Reggie Geary.
No, I want him to be a rich man's Kyer.
Well, now with NIL, I don't know who's got what money.
What's better, a rich man's Kyer or a poor man's Reggie Geary?
What if they're the same person?
They might be the same person.
They might be.
So if
Maybe it's
Boswell's
Courtney Ramey
good this year, can he be the sheriff of Fansville? I mean, can we just go ahead and sorry.
For sure. All right, guys. So also Tap and Bottle. The no days off here for PHNX. We're going to have an 8:00 watch party tomorrow. They're going to stay open. Arizona's playing UCLA, giving the people what they want. Arizona football at Tap and Bottle. Come check it out. We got Four Peaks down there as well. Mountain Mike's Pizza, a new sponsor, will be down there as well. Should be a great time. I'm going to be down there. You know what? Love to see all of you down there. We've had some pretty good showings, so appreciate you all. But before we sign off here, guys, in summation, what did you see? What concerns you? What did you like?
I guess my concern was the fouls. And I know some of that's, everyone's talking about Arizona giving up. What did they give up? But they held them to 36% shooting. The problem is they gave them 30 trips. When was the last time a visiting team that wasn't a top 10 team shot 30 free throws and, or made 20 free throws in McHale? That's 20 free points. If you half that, suddenly that point spread looks a lot more juicy for those DraftKings people. But, that to me, that and the turnovers are the concerns. The good news is they look deep. Again, when Ramey gets here, they're gonna go 9 deep or at least 8.5 deep with Boswell, depending on what his actual roles are. So yeah, I'm encouraged by Arizona, but they got a lot to clean up. But that's why you play Southern, and that's why unfortunately that's why Arizona wasn't like Gonzaga playing Michigan State tonight.
Right. I think this is going to be, I think, a relative tendency throughout college basketball over the course of the next couple months. There's going to be a lot of wild inconsistency out there and a lot of movement. And you're looking at how these things gel probably closer to January and February. Arizona's going to go through some of those consistency issues as well. I think the thing that is reason to have concern is that pressure issue. I think this is, if you're what you can get out of video in the first couple games is hard to say if you're the opposition, but I think one of the things you get out of what Southern attempted and had some success doing is that the potential is there for Arizona to be pushed around a little bit. And how is Arizona going to react to that? It doesn't mean you need to push back. If you just score buckets and you run your stuff well, then you're going to take care of that. But, there are going to be situations where Arizona is going to be pressured at an uncomfortable level, and they're going to have the physicality and the wherewithal to be able to work through that.
All right, everybody out there, really appreciate all your comments. We'll be back with you tomorrow, probably about midnight.
When we're all stone cold.
Yep, exactly. There we go. For Brad Alice, really appreciate you hopping on. Schuster, on Mike Luke, and everybody, all the comments. You guys are the ones that make the show go. Really appreciate you all. We will be back with you tomorrow. You've been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast.